So, welcome to part two, and we have covered topic one, some of two, and most of three. So we still have to cover some of this, and then we're going to come and finish up with polyline information. All right, and you will have an assignment that will be in two parts. One is to do a auxiliary view, and the second would be to create the hatching on a drawing that you're going to have to download. All right, more on that later. So back to the drawing. All right, let's get more familiar with hatching. So I want to make sure that you are back in the section line layer, and then come over in the draw panel and select the hatch button. All right, so we added this hatch down here, and I want you to put your mouse in between the two rectangles and go ahead and click, and then enter. Okay, so same thing, but I want to point out some of the behavior of hatching. Notice when you have text that there's this imaginary boundary around that text. And the hatch is pretty smart. We can get away with changing a fair amount of things without worrying about the hatch, and I'll show you when we go beyond its capability. So, for example, click on your piece of text and grab the grip and just move that over to another spot and click. What it does is it heals up the first hatch boundary and kind of punches a hole in the second one. That will also happen, I'm going to hit escape, with the inner rectangles. So I'm going to go to move, and you have to carefully select the rectangle without clicking the hatch, and then enter, and then just move that rectangle to a different spot. Right? So that the hatch will cooperate, but I'm going to show you when it will not cooperate. So I'm going to go back to move, and I'm going to pick on the, I didn't click quite right, click right in between the hatch lines there, and I'm going to move this where some of this goes out beyond the shape. Okay, so you probably wouldn't have expected it to hatch in this outer area, and that's just kind of weird. So what we've done is we've gone beyond the hatching intelligence. I'm just going to do an undo. And if you needed to move this half out and half in, you could just simply erase the hatch and redo it. Now, hatch is what's known as associative. What does that mean? There's intelligence, as we just saw, but when I go back and I click on the hatch, notice that it's all seen as one object, but the ribbon returns. Okay? And when the ribbon returns, we can make any changes we want to the existing pattern, and it will automatically be placed in that. And so that's going to come in handy a lot. More on that in a couple of minutes. Hey, so let's say we're going to add some hatch inside this outer portion of the circle. So let's go back to the hatch button. Only this time, we've got a pretty big list of patterns. I want you to click on this little tiny button here. Let me highlight it. There's an up arrow, a down arrow, and this is like a list button arrow. Click on that, and that's going to open up your display of hatch patterns. But there's even more. If you look in the very corner, there's those three dots. I can grab that and drag that out, and I've got quite a bit of patterns showing there. The patterns are broken down into three categories. You have your mechanical ones here. You have you have your architectural patterns and civil patterns in the middle, and then you have these ACAT ISOs more for a metric style type pattern. And then you've got these colored ones that we're going to get back to in a couple of minutes here. So right now we're in the ANSI 31. Now you've heard me say that, the ANSI, American National Standards Institute. And they've developed these patterns, and this one is particularly number 31. You've got, let's say, all of the ARs are architectural. And be careful with them because, let's say, for example, this AR B18, that means B816. The 8 is the height of one of these little bricks, and the 16 is the width. That's like a foundational block. This thing we drew over here is probably not even 8 by 16, so you wouldn't see anything in there. So these are actual architectural size patterns here. So I want you to choose a pattern on here, but don't choose any of the ARs and don't choose any of these ACAT ISOs just look at that list and find one, and let's say click it, and then put your mouse inside the circle, but don't click it. So we see that there's, I chose the honeycomb type pattern, and let's say that the pattern is too small. I want to increase the size of it. So before I click, I'm going to come up to my ribbon in my properties panel, and I've got, this is scale, this is the angle, and I can make that more or less transparent. More on that in a couple of minutes. Okay, so let's say if I want to make the pattern bigger, I need to make the scale bigger. So I'm going to highlight the one and say 2, and then bring my mouse back in there and rest it. Okay, so it definitely got bigger. But now let's say I want to rotate the pattern a little bit. So in my angle, let's just say I click on the number, and I'm just going to say 30 degrees. Let's see what that does. It doesn't look like I did much, right? And that's simply because of the angle of the honeycomb. All right, keep track of the vertical lines on there on the left and the right. So I'm going to change this to, let's say, 45 degrees, and now you should see somewhat of a change. Okay, so when I rest my mouse in there and I see the pattern is rotated, now I'm going to click. Okay, so think about what we did to that. We doubled the size, we rotated the pattern. So we have a lot of control over, what we can do with a piece of hatch. All right, let's do one more thing here, actually a couple more things. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to go back to layer 0, and we're going to draw a couple of pieces of construction. I'm going to go to the rectangle command and just draw me a rectangle that's, approximately proportionate to that. And then I'm going to make 2 copies of that. So we have 3 rectangles that are the same size. So I'm going to hit copy, select that, enter, and just make copy 1, 2, and 3. All right. So once you've made those 3 copies, let's go back to the hatch button. Okay. Hatch button again. And let's reset the pattern back to the ANSI 31. So I could do that just by clicking this up arrow so I get all the way to the top. And then I select 31. And beware, because once you change the angle and the scale, it stays at those settings until you change it. Right? There's no reset button. So I'm going to put this back to 1, and this was originally on 0. And I could just drag this little slider so that we're easier. And I want you to add hatch to all 3 rectangles. And I see I didn't go back to the section line layer, but that's okay. I'm going to keep going. Click, and then clicking in this one. One thing you'll notice is that your computer's performance is going to slow down pretty quickly with hatching. Believe me when I say this, it used to be a lot worse. But even though it's a lot better, it still can be an issue. And let me, before I forget, your computer is going to be pushed to its limits when you're doing hatching in both the performance and the frequency of your computer freezing or locking up will go up a couple of notches on the probability ladder, so to speak. So when you're doing hatching, my strong advice is save often. And there's nothing worse than putting effort into something and then it's all out of waste because you lost it. Okay? Save often when you're hatching. Okay, so let me just click on this pattern here. Now notice they all highlight. So even though I was thinking, I have to pick each one here and put them in the correct layer, it's all seen as one object. So what I'm going to do is go back to my home tab in the ribbon and put it back in layer section lines. Okay, and then hit escape. Now I want to show you something. So I added hatch to all 3, and because I did that in one shot, it's all seen as one object. So the problem is, what if I want to, let's say, do a move, and I'm going to window in on this and hit enter. All 3 hatches are going to be involved in that, and that's no good. So what I can do is kind of break them up, and no, I would not do that by exploding. That leads to a question. Can you explode hatch? Yes, you can. Should you explode hatch? Never. you're going to be left with a big mess on your hands. There'll be a million little lines that you have to then deal with. So don't explode hatch. All right, so what I need to do is to separate those into 3 pieces. And now we're going to start transitioning into editing hatch. So I'm going to select on this hatch, and when I pick on that, my ribbon returns to the same look as if I was creating a hatch. And in my options tab, I'm going to select the word options. That'll open up, and you'll see separate hatches. So I'm going to click on that, and now you'll see that just the one lights up, right? If I hit escape and I click the second one, only that'll light up and so forth. So now I don't have to worry. I can move. I can do whatever I want, and this is treated as if it's its own. And it's not exploded, right? It's just separate. Okay, so that's a handy feature because now we can add hatch to a lot of things at once and then just go back and separate. All right, what I want you to do is to delete the middle piece of hatch, and we're going to work with that. All right, the next thing I want to show you is sometimes you want to put hatch on top of hatch, and you want to make hatches a solid color, but you want to tone down the intensity of that. So that's what the next 3 things we're going to look at will be. What I want you to do first is to go back to the hatch button, and this time select solid. Okay, so I'm going to pick solid, only I want to change its color. I don't want it to be green anymore. So over here in my properties, I've got this, this is the by layer, color by layer, and this, because it's white, it tells me I'm still in layer 0, but it's okay because we're going to change the color. So I'm going to click on this, and let's say I'll choose this, this bright orange color here, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click. Notice my cursor comes to a halt when I drag it in there because it's taking a lot of graphics energy. I'm going to click in that and then hit enter. Now, what I want you to notice is a couple of things. One is my white boundary that was drawn before I hatched this seems to have disappeared. And that's going to lead to the next section, which is transparency and which is what you would call draw order. So we're going to learn those 2 things at once. And this is going to be important for your homework assignments because this is going to make a good difference in your results and the future in your AutoCAD life of creating fancy, graphical images. Now, what I want to show you is we're going to go back to the PowerPoint, and I want to show you this image. This is on page 692. For your second assignment in this lesson, you're going to have to create a result like this. Right? And then you're not drawing it. I'm giving you just a line drawing, and you're going to add the materials to that. And I want you to observe there's a few things happening here. Number 1, you've got your standard hatching, right? This would be a roof, shingles. These could just be lines. There's a hatch pattern called lines, and you would have to create a scale that would represent your siding lines, and typical siding lines are 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches, 7 inches. On a very big house, they would be more on the 7-inch. On a house like this, it'd be closer to the 4 to 5 inch. It'd be proportionate to the size of the house. But we've got something else going on here. We've got transparency. So anything that's this solid blue here, which should be this shadow line is what that is, this window and this little darker blue in here, those are all the same solid color hatch. What makes those different is the transparency level. The higher the transparency level, the less intense the color looks. So it gives us a whole other graphical element to show shadow lines, or think about why this is a little darker here. I'm going to pause and say, do you think you know why that would be in this type of a drawing? Well, the answer to that is for depth. Okay? The darker areas are giving you the illusion that it's further back. And it is, in real life. It's set back. Okay? So you can now represent depth with that. And then, of course, as I mentioned, these are shadow lines, which is a common representation in architecture. Okay? So this is an important graphic to hang on to so that you can represent or use this as a model for your assignment. All right, so back to the drawing, and this is pretty much what's happening here is my outline lines got overpowered by this solid hatch here. So we're gonna do a couple of things here. Make sure you're in layer 0. Go to the line command, and I'm going to draw a line right across this. Okay. Now you can directly see that the orange solid color overpowered the line. Now the strange thing is, I'm not sure I could say that for all of you. A couple of you might be seeing the line. A couple of you don't. And if you look at my screen, strangely enough, the outline shows up to here, but not in my lower portion. Okay? This is classic hatch, and it'll play tricks with you and sometimes make you crazy, but we just have to outsmart it, right? And that'll be some of the challenge. Now, challenge number 2 is an easy trap to fall into. We are looking at a black background. But when you create your drawing and you print it or you present it, it's going to be in layout space, which will be a white background. So really, all of these white lines are black, and the background, which is black, is white, and the color scheme that you think looks great in model space might look bad in layout space. So what you need to do is constantly switch to layout and see, hey, how does it look in here? Okay? So remember I told you it'll play tricks with this? So in layout, I do see the outer border of my boundary edge. So my concern or my stress was really unfounded in model space. And that, again, is a reason you've got to switch back and forth spaces to see, hey, what am I really seeing here? Now, I want to be able to see this line going through there. So let's go back to model space. Now, what happens when you hatch, it gets put into the background in one big long database, step by step, right? And the orange hatch, even though we added the line after, the database sees that line as being an older step than the orange, or the orange hatch is a younger step. So what we need to do is what's called draw order, and we need to put this line on top of the orange hatch. Okay, that's called draw order, and it's called bring to front or send to front. Now, how we do that is we select the line and we right click. Okay, and when you right click, you're going to see in the middle of your pop down, you'll see of your pop up menu, you see draw order, and there's 4 choices. And what we want to do is say bring to front. Right? Now you see it on top of the orange hatch. Now let's see if it's the same in layout space. Okay? I was going to say sometimes it's not, and it'll make you crazy. So what we have to do, let's double click to activate layout space, and let's do a regen. Okay? So there's the good old regen craziness again. Okay, so this is the game, so to speak, you have to play. Now, I wouldn't worry a whole lot. Every time you draw something, you have to come in here and look. You usually wait to near the end of the drawing, and then you play this game, right? You do the draw order thing, you go into layout, and you type in regen, and you should only have to do that once, right? Unless you then continue adding things to the drawing, it may not be reset or regenerated. Okay, so don't let that make you crazy, because you could obsess over that and wind up spending so much time that's really wasted when you can get away with just doing it once or twice near the end of your drawing. All right, I'm going to go back to model space. Now, once again, draw order. So you would click whatever it is you want to change, you right click, draw order in the middle, and you either bring to front, or in this case, let's say I don't want to see the line through the hatch. I'm going to send to back. Okay, now I look at that and I say, wait a minute, I'm going to try a regen again. And I think I might know what's going on here with me. This is left over from my, when I was showing you 3D. Alright, so some of that craziness was brought on by myself. So I'm going to go back to layout, and we're good to go there. So, the fact that I had a shade mode on left over from the 3D might have caused that confusion when I switched to layout, and maybe you did see yours and you were thinking, what, is he crazy? But, hey, you saw strange things can happen. So I'm going to go back to monospace. Now, I want to make the orange a bit transparent, because look, when we go look at this in layout space, that is very bright, you know, and I may not want my attention to be brought to that. It's so outstandingly bright. So making this transparent is going to do two things. It's going to make me see through, and I'll start seeing the line through it, and the orange color is going to get toned down. Okay? So what I'm going to do is select on the hatch, and I'm going to go up to hatch transparency, and I'm going to drag this up. You don't have to do much. I was going to say about 20, 30%, but I'm going to leave it at, let's say, 23%. Okay? And then I'm going to hit escape. I can start seeing the line, the orange tone down, and let's see how that looks. Okay? So it's not quite as bright. We should have made a copy so we could compare, right? One from the other. And that's easy enough to do. You don't have to do this. Just watch me. Let me go to copy. I'm going to pick this, and I'm going to get rid of the transparency. That's back to 100. And let's see the comparison to that. Okay, so this is, you know, much more vivid, it's bright, and ironically I can see through. Let me try to region. But here, again, is the classic. You gotta play games with that. So because I copied it, it probably didn't hold the draw order to that. Yeah, so now, I'm kind of glad this happens, because this is going to happen to you. It'll make you crazy. Oh, and I see I'm still in this shade mode when my icon has that. I got to go back to 2D wireframe. That's the culprit here. All right. So notice the orange color got toned down. Now you could always change to a color that's more toned down. This is more peachy or salmony color, but you know, that's just one way of doing it, and it makes it transparent, which you may or may not want. Okay, so transparencies and this draw order, bring to front, send to back. Now I'm going to take this to the next level. I'm going to delete this line, and let's say that I want to add a texture look. So I'm going to put another hatch on top of this hatch, and so let me back up here, because I copied this and I told you not to do that. Let me just delete this, and we'll apply that to this. So let's go and literally make a copy of this. Okay, so we can all be on the same page, so to speak. I'm going to copy that down to here. Let's get rid of the line, and let's click on the hatch and put the transparency back to 0. Okay, so we copied this, erase the line, click on the hatch, put the transparency back to 0. Oh, yeah, F1 key accidentally. Okay, so now we're going to add a texture effect to this. Give it a stucco look, or a rougher surface. So we're going to add a hatch on top of the hatch and see what that does. So I'm clicking my hatch button. I'm opening up my list of hatch styles, and we could use this AR Sand to give this a textury look, or AR Concrete, maybe a bit more dense. Let's do the AR Sand. Now, warning here, this is AR, which means it's going to be for a much bigger piece. So we're going to have to scale down this pattern. So I'm going to click on the pattern. Before I even put my mouse in there, because I probably won't see anything, I'm going to click and highlight the scale of 1, and let's type in 0.25, okay, a quarter of the scale. We may have to go lower, right? Enter. Now when I put my mouse in here and I move around, not seeing much, so let's take a chance. I'm going to highlight this, and let's type in 0.05. Right, that's going down pretty low. 0.05. And then I bring my mouse in here and hold still. You know what it is? Look at the color. So we're putting the same color object on there. So hopefully you didn't click. I'm going to click on this list and set it back to by layer. All right. Now when I put my mouse in here, I'm going to just take a chance and click. There we go. Okay. Now, I have a textured hatch. Remember, we are in model space. So what's white is black. So press enter to complete. Let's think about what I did. When I was adding this sand color, my color, right, my color up here was still the orangey color. So I would never have seen this. So be careful of that. So I had to change my color back to my layer, which is white. Okay? Now, go to layout. So that's what it's really going to look like. So if you're zoomed way out, that looks really dense, really, heavy texture. So you may have to change the scale of that, which means you have to click it. So you have to click and hope for the best. Sometimes you'll click and the solid color gets selected. But we hit it just right here. So let's double this and bring this up to 0.1. And it almost looks like it's on an uphill angle. So let's just play with that because we can. And remember, positive number goes counterclockwise. So I'm going to say -10, which would be 10 degrees. So it's going to rotate it clockwise 10 degrees. And I'm just guessing it's 10. And I went a little bit too much. So let's say -5, which is really 355. Better. Okay? And then I'm going to hit escape. And then go back into layout. And there's my textured look. Now, you have to be careful because as you draw and edit, it is possible for AutoCAD to occasionally get confused and you look and all of a sudden the texture is gone. Like, what happened? I must have accidentally erased it. And you go and you do all of this over again and you continue working and you look back and it's gone again. What's happening, I can almost guarantee, is that the draw order gets reversed, that the sandy pattern goes behind the solid pattern. So on occasion, you might have to go into model space and you probably won't see the textured pattern. So you could just guess and click and hope you'll get that. So if you actually, if you successfully click that, you would right click, draw order, bring to front. Or if you get the background, you could right click, draw order, send to back. Okay? So it's kind of one and the same there. And then always do a test in layout. Say, hey, is it what I think it is? And then you can move on. Okay, so that's a lot of little things with Hatch, and there's plenty more. But let's go and pick our Hatch button, and let me just look to make sure I've covered all the basics here. So we've got the scale, we've got the angle, we've got transparency, we can change color, and we've got the patterns here. I'm going to show you one more thing here. So I'm going to hit escape so we can set up for this. Erase the hatch in that third rectangle. Erase that. And what we're going to do is a gradient. Okay? Gradient hatch is great. And I have to check if this house had it here. No, this house does not have gradient windows. But gradient windows would be, it starts with one color and becomes another color. And I want to show you a really nice look. And remember this technique for your assignment because this looks really nice on there. So let's go back to the hatch and open up your list. And these are all of your gradient collections, right? So we're going to go with gradient linear. Select gradient linear. And the way this is by default is it goes from left to right. We actually want it to go from top to bottom. We'll fix that after. See that? I mean, that's... Excuse me, I sneezed, but I muted, I think. So, what I want this to do is to go from top to bottom, and we're going to need to rotate that, but we'll leave it the way this is for the moment. We need to change the color. Those are not typical window colors. So select blue, and I want you to get this just a slightly greenish or slightly bluish color. Let's go with a slight bluish color, and then change the yellow to white. Okay, and then bring your mouse in. Okay, now let's rotate this, and we need to rotate this. I believe it's 270. I've done this enough. I think it's 270. So say 270, enter. Good. So the blue is at the top and it fades to white at the bottom. So that looks good. Go ahead and click. And then enter. And typically in Windows for architectural renderings, you have these glass marks, and there's just three little parallel lines that look like that. Okay, we're going to make them off to the side here. So I'm going to zoom in and make sure you're in layer 0, go to line, and I'm just going to draw a line, let's say, on a 45-degree angle, not very big, good enough. And once you've drawn that little line, you can kind of see in the context of the full window. Then I'm going to zoom in to that, and I'm going to draw a line parallel to it, but shorter on both ends. So I'll keep it fairly close, and that's about right. And then I'm going to mirror that to the other side, just so I'm accurate here. So I'm going to go to mirror, I select just this line, enter, and I'm going to snap from endpoint to endpoint of the big line. Okay? So when I zoom out, you get a sense of how big or how small it is. So what I'm going to do now is copy that 3 times into the window. I'm going to say copy, enter that in, and I'll just say I'm going to click here, I'll put one up there, I'll put one, let's say, over here, and one way down low there. Now you look at that and you say, gee, I can barely see it. Remember, white is black. Okay? So let's look back now into layout 1, and you can see how that looks, right? It's a nice look, and it's a very common architectural effect when you have glass. It's just a tint of blue fading down to a whitish color. Okay, so I'm hoping you'll use that in your assignment, right, and really give it a nice look. Okay, so we've just seen a lot of things about hatching, right? So we can edit hatch by single-clicking on it, and we have access to the ribbon. We've got our gradient look, which we just did. We've got the draw order. We've got the transparency, the angles. Okay, so lots of stuff with hatch. None of it terribly complex. What will be aggravating is the send to back, bring to front, and the fact that your computer will slow down. Okay, so that's all part of the process. Okay, I'm going to go back into model space, and one last time, I'm going to zoom out, and we're going to set up for our last section for polyline. So, zoom out about as far as I've done. We're in layer 0, and we're going to select polyline. Okay? So I'm going to select the polyline button, and I'm going to draw, let's say, just this zigzag. Looks like a letter M. Okay? And I do that with polyline, which is the second button over. And I'm going to select a regular line, and on the lower portion of the screen, draw the same thing. Okay? So this is with polyline, and this is with line. Now, after you've done that, and you're not in any command, put your mouse and click on the polyline. Okay, the whole thing lights up, and you have a little bit different grip pattern. The grips are the blue boxes. You have a grip in the middle of the line, and you have a square grip at the end of the line. But the middle grip looks a little different. It's a dash grip. We'll come back to that. Now, when I put my mouse and click on the lower shape, only that line highlights. Okay, so there's a big difference between polyline and line. So let's erase the line. Been there, done that. And let's also erase the polyline. Okay, so what I want you to now do is go back and select polyline. And I want you to click and draw just by eye. We don't have to do anything too accurate. Something that looks like this. Okay, I'm going to track off of this. And I'm going to say C for close. So draw me that shape, no particular size. I just did a C for close to close that up. And then go back and click on it to see that it's now all seen as one object. And then escape from it. Now, let's see some of the benefits of this. Number one is, if this were the outline of a floor plan, I could just use the offset command and offset that inward for the inside wall, whatever the thickness of the wall is. Okay? So let's do that. So let's go to the offset button here. Select specify offset distance. We don't select anything yet. And let's say, well, this is not a real size floor plan. So for us, let's say it's a 1/4 inch, but in real life it'd be 6 inches, 8 inches. All right, so let's just say 0.25, enter. And then I'm going to pick on the outer line and watch, just moving your mouse out or in, but go in and click. You have the whole shape reproduced in one easy shot. Okay, so that's a nice feature, easily done. And the fact that this was a polyline made that happen. Okay, let's copy this shape, just the outline of it, the outer wall, over and click. And I want to show you another nice feature based on the fact that this is a polyline. You get a whole bunch of different editing capabilities here. I want to put a fillet. Let's say I've got the same fillet I need on every single corner here. Let's say it's all, let's say a 1/4 inch radius. So I'm going to go to the fillet command, and I'm going to select radius, as I normally would down at the command prompt. I select radius, and I'm going to type in 0.25, enter. Now, instead of just clicking 2 edges, I'm going to select polyline down at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to pick polyline. Now all I have to do is pick anywhere on this polyline, and look what it did. It radiused all corners at once. I guess that's neat. Now let's think, what if only one of the corners were different? Let's say this one had to be a different radius. Well, I would just go back to the fillet command and treat it as I normally would. I'd pick fillet, I would say radius 0.5, enter, and I would still click on these 2 lines here, and it'll readjust and fix only that one. Okay? So you've got some good options here. All right, I'm going to pan off to the right, and let's see some other good features with polyline. So go ahead and click polyline to start a new one. On your screen, click to begin. Now notice, I want you to start noticing all the different features that your command prompt, that polyline has, that line does not have. Okay? I'm going to move my mouse, let's say, over to the right, and this time I'm going to say 6 for 6 inches, 6 enter. Now, look down at your command prompt. The very first option down there is arc. Okay? So I'm going to come down and I'm going to select the arc option. Now I'm still in my polyline command, but it jumps into now letting me continue this line as an arc. So I'm going to move my mouse down and I'm going to type in 2, enter. Now I'm still in the arc mode, and look at how many more options appear with the fact that you're in the arc mode. Okay, so your options just get more and more when you're in the polyline command. But let's say I don't want to draw an arc anymore. I want to go back to the line command, right? Otherwise, it's going to want you to just keep drawing arcs. So come down to the command prompt and select the line option. Now come back to your left and say 6, another 6-inch long line. Okay, let's jump back into the arc mode again. So I'm going to go back to arc. And then I'm going to come up and I'm going to snap to where my line started from. So I'm just going to click and then enter. Okay, so this is all seen as one object now because I drew that as a polyline. Okay, kind of neat, right? Okay, another thing that polylines can do, I can have a line show thickness. I can automatically draw using thickness. Okay, so let's do that. So step 1, go back and pick polyline and select somewhere on screen to begin your polyline. And once again, look back down at the command prompt. Okay, the command prompt has some options. This time select width. All right, I'm going to pick W for width. And I'm going to say 0.25, enter for starting width. And I want the ending width to also be 0.25. And notice it defaulted to that. So I'm going to accept that and press enter. Now move your mouse to the right and say 6, enter. And I have a line that's a 1/4 inch thick. And if I want to repeat what I did before, right, I'm going to go to A. I could type in A for arc or come down and pick arc. Move my mouse down and I could type in 2, enter. Go back and pick line. Come back to the left and say 6, enter. Go back and reset the arc mode and come back and snap to where I started from. Okay, so everything you draw will maintain that line thickness. All right. The problem here is every time you start drawing, it's going to be that thickness. So if you wanted to reset it, like let's do that now, right? So I picked polyline, I picked the point to start. I'm going to go back down to width, and I'm going to say starting with 0, enter, and then ask for ending width, and it's also 0, press enter again, and now I'm back to 0 line thickness, right? So I just drew a couple of shapes there. Next thing, and this is great for civil engineers, all right? I'm going to zoom out a little bit more, so look at how small my drawing is, and let's all do the following. Pick polyline, pick a point to start, and just randomly draw me this shape. And you don't have to, but do a close. Keep the close. Once you've drawn that shape, go to copy, and copy that. So you have 2 of the exact same thing. Now, polyline edit. We can edit polylines in a number of ways. So, for example, I can do what's called a curve fit or a spline curve to smoothen this shape out. So imagine in civil engineering, you have contour lines to represent the elevation, and those contour lines are always very smooth. So in AutoCAD, you could draw them point to point, and it'll look, very segmented. But then what we'll do is we're going to select the polyline, we're going to right-click, and we're going to select polyline in the right-click menu, and select curve fit. And watch what happens. It smooths that out. Now do the same thing to the one next to it. Select that one, right click, polyline, and spline fit. And that smoothens it out even more. To understand what it just did, go back and pick each one of these. Okay, notice that in the curve fit, it's still going right through the grip points. Those represent every time we clicked when we drew it. Whereas in the spline fit, it averages the curves between the clicks, and it's even more mellow. And you could click one of these grips and further stretch it out and work with that. There's a lot of little things you can do even with this, and I would encourage you to look through your book in that chapter. Editing polylines, drawing and editing polylines. Okay, so I'm going to hit escape, and I want you to click on the right one, right click, polyline, and decurve. Decurve puts it back to its original shape. Now, last thing I want to show you here. We are going to go full cycle. This is obviously a polyline, right? Let's say that we drew this as a regular line. Well, obviously we didn't. We just saw it's a polyline. So to represent that, let's explode it. Okay? So if you explode a polyline, you convert it to regular line segments. So the explode button is right below erase. Select explode, select on the line, and hit enter. Now, when you click one individual line segment, it's now independent. So let's say you open up a drawing and you wanted to do the fit curve or the spline curve on this, and you go to click on it and you're like, oh no, it's not a polyline. Well, what we can do is transform it back to one continuous polyline. The problem here is if I click on this and right click, I'm not going to see polyline. Why? Because it's not a polyline. We only saw that there because when we clicked on a polyline, it gave us that option. So what we have to do is one of 2 things. We can go to the Modify panel, and the Edit Polyline button is right there. It's right smack in the middle. So select Edit Polyline, and it says Select Polyline. Well, you might think, well, it's not a polyline. How can we click it? Well, go ahead and select one of the segments, and you get this little question. You want to turn it into one? Yes, we do. So yes is already in default, so I just hit enter. Then it says all these options, and what I want to do is join them. So I'm going to click join, and I'm going to window in on the entire shape. And I'm going to press enter. Alright, and then just hit escape to dismiss that list, and then go back and pick on it, and look, it's back to being all one. Now that we picked on it, right click, now we have polyline, and we can put it back to a line fit curve. Okay? So, great features that we can apply because they are polyline. One more last thing. What else we can do to that is if we pick on that, and we right click, and we go to polyline, I could go to width, and I could add width after the fact. Let's say 0.5 enter. Alright? So, you can give width to a polyline, you can take it away with the edit polyline. Right? So I'm going to click on it, right click, polyline, width, and then 0. Alright, that is going to conclude our lesson. The final thing you need to do is to download the assignment paper. And I'm going to make one last tiny recording of just the assignment so that if you want to look that over, you don't have to fast forward or go through the whole recording. So the third recording is going to be just the assignment. Okay, so closing out on this one, and make sure you look at the part 3 for the assignment. That is both auxiliary view and sectioning. Okay, so